on this map here, the light pink is where the fire burnt. The darker pink is where we applied fire. So you can see that that fire, the head of that fire pretty much was cut in half by that fuel treatment project and by firing this road up here. So without that, it could have been well past the 102 road our first day here. And then that puts, all kinds of stuff. It puts the ski area, the communication site, the Pecos Wilderness, the Santa Fe watershed, everything to the south is in harm's way. So, if you ask me, that saved the day on this fire. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Buck Wickham. I'm Operations Section Chief on the Southwest Area Team 4, Carl Schwope Incident Management Team.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dennis Carroll. I'm the Fuels Program Manager for the Santa Fe and Carson National Forest here in northern New Mexico.
And I'll give you a brief kind of update of what we experienced with this fire. The point of origin was right in this area here. It was a lightning start. It was termed to be a lightning start. Then late in the afternoon, the first day we were here, we had a pretty good wind out of the north, which is kind of uncommon for this area, but we've had winds going from every direction due to thunder cells, forming around the fire. And so the fire took a turn to the south with that north wind. It spotted across Rio and Medio right in here with a pretty intense fire. In fact, I think about a third of this fire has a crown replacement burn. And there's an area here where it burnt the second day. And then the first day we were here, it had a pretty good head on it. It was a sustained crown fire, which is completely unsafe for us to take action on, and it was headed to the south. And as we got here and we were looking at a map, one of the things that we do when we get here is see if there's roads in front of it, if there's a river in front of it, or any break in the fuel where we can start to make a line. And we had this Pacheco fire from 2011 that was protecting it from going on the eastern side. And then we had this fuel treatment project right here in front of it. Once we realized that there was a break in the fuel right here that would slow the forward progress of the fire. And I might add that's about the only thing that would slow the head of a sustained run crown fire. The fire was spotting from a quarter to a half mile out in front of it. And by that I mean the intensity of the fire was throwing sticks and embers and pine cones up into the air. And they were landing a half mile in front of the fire, and they would start another fire. And as the main fire closes in with them spot fires, they just kind of leapfrog, and it creates an incredible intensity. Out of this was a fuel treatment plan. This was the first block burnt. And along this ridge, they had other blocks that they were working on getting ready to burn in their project. And there was a road that went along the top of this ridge, and actually it was a shaded fuel break, which the forest had thinned out, and they were going to use it as a line when they burnt their blocks. And this fire was approaching that. Well, that shaded fuel break provided us an excellent opportunity, and we did fire that the first night in hopes to get in front of the fire and stop that run, which it didn't. It worked to a point. The next day it filled in down in here, but just having that in place gave us a foothold to try and stop the head fire that was coming to the south. We did receive several spot fires out here in this treatment area. However, those spot fires, because the area was treated, there wasn't enough fuel to sustain those fires getting up in the crown. We were able to pick up all those spot fires, and they were all small. I think the biggest one was 1/10 of an acre, which again is a reflection of the benefits of the fuel treatment area. And one of the strong feelings I have about it is no matter where we go all around the country, our primary objective is public and firefighter safety. And quite frankly, dealing with these fires in a fuel bed that's missed so many different fire cycles, it's a safety issue for us, and it's a safety issue for the public also. I was on the Cerro Grande fire, and I think that in itself sets a prime example of what fire is capable of doing on the right day in the wrong fuel bed. And so I'm a strong proponent of prescribed fire treatments and fuel treatments from a safety standpoint. And what a treatment does, the reason it makes it safer is it just, you've removed the fuel, And so those flame lengths don't reach that intensity where they can get up in the canopy. They're a lot easier to contain because they're smaller. There's not the amount of fuel there that causes that hazardous scenario. So, like these spots in that fuel treatment area, where the flames are 200 feet out here on sustained run, the spots in there, the flame lengths are like 1 to 2 feet.
And Dennis, you and your team were involved in the planning of these fuel treatment projects. How do you decide where to put these fuel treatments when you don't know where the fire is going to be? Is it random across the landscape?
No, not exactly, right? But that's a really good question. Like, how do we determine where do we go with our finite resources of personnel capacity to do this work, or the more critical one, funding? So the beginning of this project, the idea of this started back in 2014. Myself and my mentor and my supervisor at the time, Bill Armstrong, were looking at Pacheco Canyon. And honestly, this might be a little known fact that maybe folks haven't heard on the team, but Bill, when he was on the Espanola District years ago, did some treatments up there at the top of that prescribed burn that Buck is pointing to back in the late 90s or mid 90s, early 90s. And what he was thinking was, originally when we were looking at this ground, was like, hey, let's build off of this. We have values at risk is where, to answer your question directly, we really think about and look at values at risk and how we prioritize things.
And Dennis, this isn't the first of your fuels treatment projects to interact with a wildfire in this way, where the fuels treatment changed the behavior or allowed for some kind of other suppression. Do you have another anecdote or two that you want to share with us?
Man, there's a lot of anecdotes to share on that one. And it's been increasing over time, and I think that's what you're getting at. Just the last 3 or 4 years especially. In fact, Buck was here on the Venado fire a couple years ago, and we had a ton of treatments that were in place there. And I was a task force leader with you guys on that one, working that, where we knew all that ground and all those treatments. There's multiple ways that those treatments interacted, but the big one was we did a cut and pile unit of about 150 acres and burned it in 2015, and it absorbed a crown fire, a running crown fire, smacked right into that thing and dropped to the ground.
That's absolutely the truth.
And some of what we're challenged on with the public understanding of what we're trying to do is this idea that what we're doing, one, doesn't matter. It doesn't have any impact on fire behavior, and what Buck's saying, that's not really the case. And it goes to this concept that fuels matter. Fuels do matter. And some of what we're seeing with these treatment interactions and the ones in the past, and not only on this forest, but all over the Southwest and all over the West, fuels do matter, especially in frequent fire ecosystems where we have the scientific data, the fire history data. Like in this particular area, we have data collected within the footprint of these projects. That's really uncommon. And what that data tells us is that this place used to burn every 7 years. Every 7 years, maybe every 5 years, maybe every 10 years, but this place burned frequently, and it burned often. And we can say, draw some conclusions from the character of the fire that we never saw hundreds of years ago, in that it's recording fire on trees, and those trees are living. So not only was the fire happening often, but those trees were surviving, which tells us something about the character of how that fire was behaving.
It does. I've been doing this for a long time, and there are multiple times where I've seen that same fire behavior, where a fire that's completely out of control hits fuel treatment and falls on its face. We can get in there and catch the fire. How much did this fuel treatment project cost?
So Buck, all the mechanical work is about $800,000, and that prescribed fire was about $30,000 so dollars.
Okay, all right. So
$80
all right. There's a start. Now this fire, I believe we spent about $3.5 million on it. Okay, what is the cost if we didn't catch it at those fuel treatments? And we burn up the ski area, we burn up the Santa Fe watershed. What is the price that you put on losing your home? And so for me, I think that it's a no-brainer that they're cheaper, than the suppression cost. And also it's just like a cultural value. It's hard to put that cost on somebody that loses their house. Or, there's a lot of pueblos in this area that have, historical, way back before we were ever here, cultural values with this mountain. And how do you put a price tag on those? So I think it's a no-brainer. I think that while fuel treatment costs are a lot, in the long run, they're by far cheaper and a lot less impact culturally and socially to the surrounding areas. Fire. And you know, one of the things I like to think about is there's fires of chance, like this fire, and there's fires of choice. You know, if a lot of people that are they're not they're opponents of fuel treatments, and they say, you know, we like our forest, and a lot of people actually look at a forest that's overstocked, that hasn't burned in decades, and think they're looking at a healthy forest. I don't think they really realize the difference between, you know, what is a healthy forest and what they're looking at. And they say, well, you know, we don't want you to burn in our backyard, or, you know, we don't want to see the forest burnt, and we'll just take a chance that it won't burn. And, you know, I think that we're finding out around the Southwest that eventually these places are going to catch fire. There's more people on the landscape than there has been in the past. And then there's the fires of choice, where you can go out and you can light a fire where it's not going to be a stand replacement fire, where you've manipulated the fuels with mechanical treatments maybe, but you can start the fire, consume that fuels when it's convenient and when it won't cause catastrophic damage.
And that's what we're looking to do as managers, of reintroducing it in a way that's safe and effective, not only for the values at risk in the communities and everything else, but our watersheds, our water supply, our habitat. And it's a stepwise process. You're not going to get there every time in one step. So by taking these first steps of doing the cutting and then the first initial burn, you're building resistance to that future uncharacteristic wildfire or even a prolonged drought. As temperature goes up, we're basically giving these forests a shot. If we can go in and cut and burn and try and get it to mimic what was the historical regime, we're giving these forests a shot to sort themselves out as climate changes and temperature goes up. We're not going to do this by ourselves with the Forest Service, and it's been talked about for a long time and better coming to realization that we're going to have to do this together as a collaborative effort between everybody who's willing to kick in and understand the science behind what we're doing, understand the challenges that folks like Buck and his team are up against, to come together to do this kind of work. The kind of work we're doing, we're not out there trying to cause grief and damage to the land. We're trying to prevent it, and to have something for my kids, our future generations to go visit that we can still call a forest.